Question 1. Compliance review shows that a critical security vulnerability has been identified in the operating system of the VDI Golden Image. The security team has flagged this as a high-priority issue requiring immediate remediation. The VDI environment supports thousands of users across multiple departments, and application compatibility is a known concern with recent OS updates. What is the most appropriate course of action to address this vulnerability? Option A. Defer the deployment of the security update until the next scheduled major maintenance window, which is 3 months away. Option B. Roll back the golden image to the last known stable version, effectively undoing all recent changes and updates. Option C. Conduct thorough testing of the security update on a pilot group of users and a representative set of applications before a phased rollout to the entire user base. Option D. Immediately deploy the security update to the golden image and then recompose all linked clones. Correct answer is D. Immediately deploy the security update to the golden image and then recompose all linked clones. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI management, where a critical security update for the operating system on the golden image needs to be deployed. The challenge lies in balancing the urgency of patching a potential vulnerability with the need to maintain user productivity and data integrity. A rushed deployment without proper testing could lead to application compatibility issues, performance degradation, or even system instability, impacting a significant number of users. Conversely, delaying the update indefinitely poses a security risk. Careful judgment is required to select a deployment strategy that mitigates risk while ensuring business continuity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout of the security update. This strategy is best professional practice because it aligns with established ITIL information technology infrastructure library, principles for change management and risk mitigation, which are implicitly expected in a professional VCP certification context. A phased rollout allows for initial testing on a small subset of users or non-production environments to identify and resolve any unforeseen issues before wider deployment. This minimizes the impact of potential problems and ensures that the update is stable and compatible with the existing VDI environment and critical applications. This approach demonstrates a commitment to security and operational stability, which are paramount in managing VDI solutions. Incorrect approach is analysis. Deploying the update immediately to all users without any testing is a direct violation of sound change management practices. It prioritizes speed over stability and security, creating a high risk of widespread disruption. This approach fails to consider the potential impact on business operations and user experience, demonstrating a lack of due diligence and professional responsibility. Rolling back the entire golden image to a previous, unpatched version is an extreme measure that would undo all subsequent configuration changes and application updates made to the image since the last stable snapshot. This would lead to significant data loss for users and require extensive remediation efforts, causing substantial downtime and user frustration. It represents a failure to implement a controlled and incremental update process. Ignoring the security update until a scheduled maintenance window is also problematic. While scheduled maintenance is important, a critical security vulnerability requires a more proactive response. Delaying a critical patch indefinitely without a clear risk assessment and mitigation plan can expose the organization to significant security threats, potentially leading to data breaches or system compromise. This demonstrates a reactive rather than a proactive security posture. Professional reasoning. Professionals managing VDI environments must adopt a structured approach to change management. This involves thorough planning, risk assessment, testing, phased deployment, and rollback procedures. When faced with a critical security update, the decision-making process should prioritize minimizing risk to the environment and users while addressing the vulnerability promptly. A phased rollout, coupled with robust testing and monitoring, is the most effective way to achieve this balance, reflecting a mature and responsible IT operational practice. Question 2. Governance review demonstrates that the current implementation of VMware Horizon 7, while providing efficient desktop delivery, does not adequately segregate sensitive user data from non-sensitive data within the virtual desktop infrastructure, potentially exposing it to unauthorized access or processing beyond its intended purpose. Option A. Rely on existing end-user training programs to reinforce data handling best practices and assume users will self-regulate their data storage and access within the virtual desktops. Option B. Increase the overall storage capacity allocated to the virtual desktop infrastructure to accommodate potential data growth without altering the current data segregation or access control mechanisms. Option C. Implement granular data segregation policies within VMware Horizon 7, leveraging features like linked clones and persona management to store sensitive user data in encrypted, access-controlled repositories, and ensure all data processing adheres strictly to the organization's data handling policies and relevant legal statutes. Option D. Document the current data handling practices within the virtual desktop infrastructure as compliant with all applicable regulations, without making any technical or procedural changes. Correct answer is C. Implement granular data segregation policies within VMware Horizon 7, leveraging features like linked clones and persona management to store sensitive user data in encrypted, access-controlled repositories, and ensure all data processing adheres strictly to the organization's data handling policies and relevant legal statutes. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT governance, balancing the need for efficient resource utilization with the imperative of regulatory compliance, specifically concerning data privacy and security within a virtualized desktop environment. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying the relevant regulatory framework to a technical solution, ensuring that the implementation of VMware Horizon 7 meets all legal and ethical obligations without compromising operational effectiveness. Careful judgment is required to avoid misinterpretations of regulations that could lead to significant legal penalties and reputational damage. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the identified compliance gap by implementing technical controls that align with the principles of data minimization and access control, which are fundamental to many data privacy regulations. Specifically, ensuring that user data is stored and processed in accordance with the organization's data handling policies and relevant legal statutes, e.g., GDPR if applicable to the jurisdiction, is paramount. This proactive remediation demonstrates a commitment to regulatory adherence and safeguards sensitive information. An incorrect approach that involves simply increasing storage capacity without addressing the underlying data handling policies or access controls fails to rectify the root cause of the compliance issue. This is a regulatory failure because it ignores the substantive requirements of data protection laws, which often mandate not just secure storage, but also appropriate handling and access. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on end-user training without technical enforcement, is also a regulatory failure. While training is important, it is often insufficient on its own to guarantee compliance, as technical controls are typically required to enforce policy and prevent accidental or intentional breaches. A third incorrect approach, which involves documenting the existing configuration as compliant without making any changes, is a severe ethical and regulatory failure. This constitutes a deliberate misrepresentation of compliance status, potentially leading to significant legal repercussions and a breach of professional integrity. Professional decision-making process should involve a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory framework, a clear assessment of the technical environment's alignment with those regulations, and the implementation of remediation strategies that are both technically sound and legally compliant. This involves consulting with legal and compliance experts, prioritizing remediation efforts based on risk, and documenting all actions taken to ensure a clear audit trail. Question 3. Regulatory review indicates that a company is planning to deploy VMware Horizon 7 to provide virtual desktops to its employees. The IT team is eager to leverage the new features for improved user experience and IT management efficiency. However, the organization handles sensitive customer information and is subject to strict data privacy laws. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with data privacy regulation during the deployment and ongoing management of the virtual desktop infrastructure? Option A. Implement VMware Horizon 7 using the vendor's default configuration settings, as these are generally designed to be secure and compliant across a wide range of use cases, and address any specific regulatory concerns only if a data breach occurs. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive data classification exercise to identify all sensitive data types that will be accessed or processed by the virtual desktops, and then design security controls and data handling policies specifically tailored to protect this data in accordance with applicable regulations. Option C. Focus on the technical aspects of virtual desktop provisioning and management, such as VDI image optimization and network configuration, with the understanding that data privacy compliance is a separate IT security function that can be addressed independently of the VDI deployment. Option D. Prioritize the deployment of VMware Horizon 7 based on achieving the highest possible performance metrics and user experience scores, assuming that robust security features within the platform will inherently satisfy regulatory requirements. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive data classification exercise to identify all sensitive data types that will be accessed or processed by the virtual desktops, and then design security controls and data handling policies specifically tailored to protect this data in accordance with applicable regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between rapid deployment of new desktop virtualization technologies and the need to maintain compliance with data privacy regulations. Organizations must balance the benefits of enhanced user experience and IT agility with the critical responsibility of protecting sensitive user data. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any implementation adheres to established legal and ethical standards for data handling and security. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape before and during the implementation of VMware Horizon. Specifically, it emphasizes identifying and documenting all data types that will be processed, stored, or transmitted by the virtual desktop environment. This proactive data classification aligns with data protection principles, such as data minimization and purpose limitation, which are fundamental to regulations like GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, or similar frameworks that govern data privacy. By understanding the data, administrators can then implement appropriate security controls, access restrictions, and retention policies, thereby ensuring compliance with legal obligations regarding data confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This approach demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to responsible data stewardship. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical performance metrics without considering data privacy implications is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical lapse because it disregards the legal requirements for data protection. Such an approach risks noncompliance, leading to potential data breaches, unauthorized access, and severe penalties, including substantial fines and reputational damage. It demonstrates a lack of awareness or willful disregard for the organization's legal obligations to protect user data. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing a solution based on vendor default settings without a specific review of data handling configurations is also professionally unsound. While defaults can be convenient, they are rarely optimized for specific regulatory compliance needs. Relying on defaults without verification can inadvertently lead to the processing or storage of sensitive data in non-compliant ways, exposing the organization to legal risks. This approach lacks the necessary due diligence and tailored risk assessment required for responsible IT deployment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This framework should begin with identifying all relevant regulatory requirements applicable to the data being handled. Subsequently, a comprehensive inventory and classification of data processed by the proposed solution must be conducted. Based on this understanding, appropriate technical and organizational measures should be designed and implemented to ensure compliance. Regular audits and reviews are essential to maintain ongoing compliance as the technology and regulatory landscape evolve. This iterative process ensures that technology adoption is both innovative and legally sound. Question 4. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent pattern of increased latency and reduced application responsiveness for a significant portion of VMware Horizon View users. Analysis of the monitoring data reveals elevated CPU utilization on several connection servers and a corresponding increase in disk I/O wait times on the underlying storage array hosting the user profile disks. Which of the following diagnostic steps represents the most effective and professional approach to resolving this issue? Option A. Restart all Horizon View connection servers and security servers in a staggered fashion to clear any potential temporary glitches or memory leaks. Option B. Immediately provision additional virtual machines for the Horizon View connection servers and increase the allocated CPU and RAM for each to alleviate the perceived resource contention. Option C. Investigate the resource allocation and performance metrics of the storage array, correlating the disk I/O wait times with specific user profile disk operations, and examining the health and configuration of the connection servers for any resource bottlenecks or misconfigurations. Option D. Focus solely on optimizing the end-user applications by pushing out updated application versions and performing client-side performance tuning without investigating the back-end infrastructure. The correct answer is C. Investigate the resource allocation and performance metrics of the storage array, correlating the disk I/O wait times with specific user profile disk operations, and examining the health and configuration of the connection servers for any resource bottlenecks or misconfigurations. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a critical performance degradation in a VMware Horizon View environment, specifically impacting user session responsiveness and application launch times. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly affects end-user productivity and business operations, necessitating a swift and accurate diagnosis. The pressure to restore service quickly can lead to hasty decisions, potentially overlooking root causes or implementing ineffective solutions. Careful judgment is required to balance the urgency of resolution with the need for a systematic and compliant troubleshooting process. The correct approach involves a methodical investigation that prioritizes identifying the root cause of the performance issue within the VMware Horizon View infrastructure. This includes analyzing logs, performance metrics, and configuration settings across all relevant components such as connection servers, security servers, unified access gateway, vCenter server, and the underlying storage and network infrastructure. The focus should be on correlating observed symptoms with specific events or resource constraints. This systematic approach aligns with best professional practices by ensuring that solutions are targeted and sustainable, preventing recurrence of the issue. It also implicitly adheres to any operational guidelines or service-level agreements, SLAs, that mandate timely and effective problem resolution, thereby maintaining service integrity and user satisfaction. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement broad, unverified changes to the environment, such as indiscriminately increasing VM resources or altering network configurations without a clear understanding of the impact. This is professionally unacceptable because it can introduce new problems, exacerbate existing ones, or lead to unnecessary costs and downtime. Such actions lack a data-driven basis and bypass the diagnostic steps essential for accurate root cause analysis. Furthermore, without proper documentation and testing, these changes could violate change management policies and potentially lead to compliance issues if they negatively impact security or data integrity. Another incorrect approach is to solely focus on the end-user devices or applications without considering the back-end infrastructure. This is flawed because Horizon View performance is heavily dependent on the VDI infrastructure, and issues at the server, storage, or network level will manifest as poor end-user experience, regardless of the client-side configuration. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured troubleshooting methodology. This typically includes 1. Clearly defining the problem and its impact, 2. Gathering all relevant data and symptoms, 3. Forming hypotheses about potential root causes, 4. Testing these hypotheses systematically, 5. Implementing the most likely solution, 6. Verifying the resolution, and 7. Documenting the entire process and outcome. This iterative approach ensures that solutions are effective, efficient, and compliant with established operational procedures and any relevant industry best practices for VDI management. Question 5. System analysis indicates that a VMware Horizon 6 deployment is experiencing an increase in user-reported performance degradation and occasional application crashes. The IT security team is concerned about potential underlying security vulnerabilities that might be contributing to these issues. Which of the following approaches best addresses the need to identify and mitigate risks within this VDI environment? Option A. Rely on the default security configurations provided by VMware for Horizon 6, assuming they are sufficient for most operational environments and require no further review. Option B. Focus security efforts on hardening the network perimeter and implementing advanced intrusion detection systems, assuming that internal VDI issues are primarily performance-related and not security-driven. Option C. Immediately deploy all newly released security patches and updates for VMware Horizon and related components, regardless of their direct relevance to the reported issues. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities specific to the Horizon 6 environment, analyze their likelihood and impact, and prioritize mitigation strategies. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities specific to the Horizon 6 environment, analyze their likelihood and impact, and prioritize mitigation strategies. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT risk management, balancing the need for robust security with the operational realities of a virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI. The challenge lies in identifying and prioritizing risks that could impact the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of sensitive user data and applications hosted on VMware Horizon. Without a structured risk assessment, the organization risks misallocating resources, overlooking critical vulnerabilities, or implementing controls that are either insufficient or overly burdensome. The professional challenge is to adopt a systematic and defensible approach that aligns with industry best practices and any applicable regulatory requirements for data protection and IT security. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that systematically identifies, analyzes, and evaluates potential threats and vulnerabilities specific to the VMware Horizon environment. This includes considering the attack surface, potential impact on business operations, and the likelihood of a threat exploiting a vulnerability. This process should inform the selection and prioritization of mitigation strategies. This aligns with general IT security best practices and is implicitly supported by the need for due diligence in managing IT assets, which is a foundational principle in responsible IT governance. While the 2V0-651 exam focuses on technical implementation, the underlying principle of risk management is crucial for effective deployment and ongoing operation of VMware solutions. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing security controls based solely on the most recent security advisories without a prior risk assessment is a reactive and potentially inefficient approach. It may lead to the deployment of controls that do not address the most significant risks to the specific Horizon deployment, or that are not cost-effective. It fails to demonstrate a proactive and reasoned approach to security, which is a hallmark of professional IT management. Focusing only on the perceived ease of implementation for security features, without considering their actual effectiveness against identified risks, is another flawed strategy. This prioritizes convenience over security outcomes, potentially leaving critical vulnerabilities unaddressed. This approach lacks the analytical rigor required for effective risk management and could lead to a false sense of security. Adopting a set-it-and-forget-it mentality, where initial security configurations are assumed to remain adequate indefinitely, is fundamentally unsound. The threat landscape is constantly evolving, and vulnerabilities are regularly discovered. Without periodic reassessment, the security posture of the Horizon environment will inevitably degrade, leaving it susceptible to new threats. This demonstrates a lack of ongoing vigilance and a failure to adapt to changing risk factors. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach risk assessment for a VMware Horizon environment by first understanding the critical assets and data being protected. This involves identifying potential threats, e.g., malware, unauthorized access, data exfiltration, and vulnerabilities within the Horizon architecture, e.g., misconfiguration, unpatched components, weak access controls. The next step is to analyze the likelihood of these threats occurring and the potential impact if they do. This analysis should then be used to prioritize risks and select appropriate mitigation strategies, such as implementing strong authentication, network segmentation, regular patching, and user training. This systematic process ensures that resources are allocated effectively to address the most significant risks, thereby maintaining a strong security posture and ensuring the availability and integrity of the VDI environment. Question 6. Implementation of a new virtual desktop infrastructure (VDI) solution using a third-party integration component is underway. During the testing phase, the administrator discovers a potential security vulnerability within this component that could expose sensitive user data. The project is under pressure to meet a tight deadline, and the integration offers significant cost savings. The administrator must decide how to proceed. Option A. Proceed with the integration as planned to meet the deadline, assuming the vulnerability is unlikely to be exploited. Option B. Immediately halt the rollout of the integration component and engage with the vendor to investigate and remediate the vulnerability, escalating internally if necessary. Option C. Inform management of the vulnerability but proceed with the integration without proposing specific solutions or mitigation strategies. Option D. Implement the integration with a quick, untested workaround for the vulnerability to meet the deadline. Correct answer is B. Immediately halt the rollout of the integration component and engage with the vendor to investigate and remediate the vulnerability, escalating internally if necessary. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a VMware administrator is tasked with implementing a new virtual desktop infrastructure (VDI) solution. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for a functional and performant system with the long-term implications of data security and compliance. The administrator has discovered a potential vulnerability in a third-party integration component that, while not explicitly forbidden by current VMware guidelines, could expose sensitive user data if exploited. The pressure to meet project deadlines and the potential for significant cost savings from the chosen solution create a conflict between expediency and responsible risk management. Careful judgment is required to navigate this ethical and technical tightrope. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves prioritizing data security and compliance by thoroughly investigating the identified vulnerability. This means pausing the immediate rollout of the integration component and engaging with the vendor to understand the risks and potential mitigations. If the vendor cannot provide a satisfactory resolution or timeline, the administrator should escalate the issue internally to stakeholders, clearly articulating the risks associated with proceeding. This approach represents best professional practice because it adheres to the fundamental ethical obligation of protecting sensitive data, a core tenet of IT professional conduct. It also aligns with the implicit requirement to implement solutions that are secure and compliant, even if not explicitly detailed in every single guideline. Proactive risk assessment and transparent communication are paramount. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding with the integration without addressing the vulnerability is a significant ethical and professional failure. This approach disregards the potential for data breaches, which can lead to severe financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of trust from users and the organization. It violates the principle of due diligence in implementing technology. Implementing the integration with a workaround that is not fully tested or documented is also professionally unacceptable. While it might seem like a quick fix, undocumented and untested workarounds can introduce unforeseen issues, instability, and new security risks down the line. This demonstrates a lack of thoroughness and a disregard for long-term system integrity. Escalating the issue to management without providing a clear assessment of the risks and potential solutions is incomplete. While escalation is necessary, simply stating a problem without offering informed recommendations or potential paths forward places an undue burden on management and may lead to rushed or ill-informed decisions. It fails to demonstrate proactive problem-solving, professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes security and compliance above all else, especially when dealing with sensitive data. This involves a continuous cycle of risk assessment, mitigation planning, and transparent communication. When faced with a potential vulnerability, the first step is always to understand the nature and impact of the risk. If the risk is significant, the next step is to explore mitigation strategies, which may involve vendor engagement, internal solutions, or, in extreme cases, deferring the implementation of the problematic component. Throughout this process, clear and honest communication with all relevant stakeholders is essential to ensure informed decision-making and to manage expectations. Question 7. The audit findings indicate that sensitive user data within the VMware Horizon environment is not adequately protected, potentially exposing it to unauthorized access and violating data privacy regulations. Which of the following actions best addresses these findings while adhering to regulatory frameworks for data protection? Option A. Implement full disk encryption for all virtual desktops and storage, and configure granular role-based access controls (RBAC) to restrict access to sensitive data based on job function. Option B. Store all user data in a centralized, unsegmented repository and rely on network-level security to protect it. Option C. Remove all encryption from data in transit and at rest, focusing solely on user consent mechanisms for data protection. Option D. Disable encryption on virtual desktop storage to improve read/write performance, as users have consented to data collection. The correct answer is A. Implement full disk encryption for all virtual desktops and storage, and configure granular role-based access controls (RBAC) to restrict access to sensitive data based on job function. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential violation of data privacy regulations concerning the storage and access of sensitive user data within a VMware Horizon environment. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient data access and management with the stringent requirements for data protection and user consent, particularly when dealing with personally identifiable information (PI). Professionals must navigate complex technical configurations and understand the legal implications of data handling. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the audit findings by implementing technical controls that align with data privacy principles. Specifically, it involves encrypting sensitive data at rest and in transit, and implementing granular access controls based on the principle of least privilege. This ensures that data is protected from unauthorized access and that only authorized personnel can view or process it, thereby adhering to the spirit and letter of data protection laws. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of data breaches and unauthorized disclosure, which are key concerns for regulatory bodies. An incorrect approach that involves disabling encryption to improve performance fails to acknowledge the fundamental requirement for data security. This action directly contravenes data protection regulations that mandate appropriate technical and organizational measures to secure personal data. It creates a significant vulnerability, exposing sensitive information to potential compromise and leading to severe regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Another incorrect approach, which involves relying solely on user consent without implementing technical safeguards, is insufficient. While consent is a crucial element of data privacy, it is not a substitute for robust security measures. Regulations often require organizations to implement technical controls to protect data, regardless of consent. This approach leaves data exposed and vulnerable to breaches, even if users have technically consented to its collection. A third incorrect approach, which involves storing all user data in a single, unsegmented repository without access controls, represents a gross negligence in data management and security. This practice makes it impossible to enforce data privacy principles, as all data is accessible to anyone with access to the repository. This directly violates the principle of data minimization and purpose limitation, and significantly increases the risk of widespread data breaches and unauthorized access to sensitive information. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and data security. This involves a thorough understanding of applicable data protection laws, a comprehensive risk assessment of the VMware environment, and the implementation of layered security controls. When faced with audit findings, the immediate priority should be to investigate the root cause and implement corrective actions that not only resolve the immediate issue, but also strengthen the overall security posture, ensuring ongoing compliance and protecting user data. Question 8. The audit findings indicate that the current risk assessment process for the organization's VMware desktop and mobility infrastructure is insufficient, lacking a systematic methodology for identifying and prioritizing potential threats and vulnerabilities. Which of the following approaches would best address these findings in a professionally sound and compliant manner? Option A. Deploy new security technologies and solutions to the VMware environment based on industry trends, without a prior assessment of specific risks. Option B. Implement a qualitative risk assessment framework that involves identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, assessing their likelihood and impact descriptively, and prioritizing them based on this assessment. Option C. Focus on documenting all existing security controls within the VMware environment without conducting a new risk identification and assessment. Option D. Rely on informal discussions with IT staff and anecdotal evidence to identify and rank potential risks to the VMware infrastructure. The correct answer is B. Implement a qualitative risk assessment framework that involves identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, assessing their likelihood and impact descriptively, and prioritizing them based on this assessment. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential gap in the organization's approach to risk assessment for its VMware desktop and mobility infrastructure. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the IT professional to not only identify risks, but also to propose a methodology that aligns with established best practices and potentially regulatory expectations for data security and operational resilience, without resorting to purely quantitative measures. The challenge lies in balancing comprehensive risk identification with a practical, qualitative approach that can be effectively implemented and communicated. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it emphasizes a structured, qualitative risk assessment methodology. This involves identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities specific to the VMware environment, assessing their likelihood and impact in a descriptive manner, and then prioritizing them based on this assessment. This aligns with general IT governance principles that advocate for a proactive and systematic approach to risk management. While specific regulations for the 2V0-651 exams jurisdiction are not explicitly stated as US or UK, general principles of data protection and IT security frameworks, which are universally applicable in professional settings, would mandate such a structured approach. This method ensures that resources are allocated effectively to mitigate the most significant risks, fostering a more secure and stable end-user computing environment. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on documenting existing security controls without a proactive risk identification and assessment phase fails to address potential future threats or vulnerabilities. This is a regulatory and ethical failure because it implies a reactive rather than a proactive security posture, potentially leaving the organization exposed to risks that could have been foreseen and mitigated. It neglects the fundamental principle of risk management, which is to anticipate and prepare for adverse events. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing new security technologies without a prior risk assessment is also professionally unacceptable. This represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure as it leads to potentially misallocated resources, ineffective security measures, and an increased attack surface if the new technologies introduce unforeseen vulnerabilities. It bypasses the crucial step of understanding what risks need to be addressed, leading to a solution looking for a problem scenario. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence and informal discussions to identify and prioritize risks is professionally unsound. This is a regulatory and ethical failure because it lacks the rigor and objectivity required for effective risk management. Decisions made on such a basis are unlikely to be comprehensive or accurate, leading to a false sense of security or an overemphasis on minor issues while neglecting critical ones. This approach is not defensible from an audit or compliance perspective. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a systematic multi-stage approach. First, understand the scope and objectives of the risk assessment. Second, identify relevant threats and vulnerabilities specific to the technology stack being assessed, in this case, VMware desktop and mobility. Third, employ a qualitative assessment framework to determine the likelihood and impact of identified risks. Fourth, prioritize risks based on this assessment. Fifth, develop and implement appropriate mitigation strategies. Finally, establish a process for ongoing monitoring and review of risks. This structured decision-making process ensures that risk management is integrated into the operational lifecycle and aligns with professional standards of due diligence and care. Question 9. Benchmark analysis indicates that a critical business unit requires a new virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI, environment to support an upcoming project with a tight deadline. The IT team has the technical capability to deploy a functional VDI solution rapidly. However, the organization operates under a strict regulatory framework that mandates specific data handling, access control, and audit logging requirements for all IT systems. What is the most professionally responsible approach to ensure the VDI deployment meets both the business unit's urgent needs and the organization's regulatory obligations? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of all applicable regulatory requirements and internal security policies, and integrate these into the VDI design and configuration process before deployment, even if it impacts the initial deployment timeline. Option B. Deploy the VDI environment focusing exclusively on achieving optimal user experience and performance metrics, as these are the primary drivers for the business unit's request. Option C. Proceed with the VDI deployment using the fastest configuration method, and schedule a separate security and compliance review for after the initial deployment is complete. Option D. Prioritize the rapid deployment of a functional VDI environment based on default configurations, with the understanding that security and compliance adjustments will be made as part of ongoing maintenance. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the VDI deployment using the fastest configuration method and schedule a separate security and compliance review for after the initial deployment is complete. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT infrastructure management, balancing the need for rapid deployment of new virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI, with the imperative to maintain compliance and security standards. The pressure to deliver a functional environment quickly can lead to shortcuts that, while seemingly efficient in the short term, introduce significant risks. The professional challenge lies in navigating these competing demands, ensuring that technical solutions do not compromise regulatory adherence or introduce vulnerabilities. The decision maker must consider not only the immediate technical requirements, but also the long-term implications for data security, user access, and auditability, all within the context of the specified regulatory framework. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough review and adherence to established security baselines and compliance policies before proceeding with the VDI deployment. This aligns with the principles of secure by design and compliance by default, which are fundamental to responsible IT governance. By integrating security and compliance checks into the initial planning and configuration phases, potential risks are identified and mitigated proactively. This approach ensures that the deployed VDI environment meets all regulatory requirements, such as data protection, access control, and audit logging, as mandated by the relevant framework. It demonstrates professional diligence by preventing the introduction of non-compliant configurations that could lead to breaches, fines, or reputational damage. Incorrect approaches analysis. Deploying the VDI environment without a comprehensive security and compliance review, relying solely on default settings, is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Default configurations are often not hardened to meet specific compliance standards and may expose sensitive data or grant unauthorized access, violating data protection regulations. Rushing the deployment to meet an arbitrary deadline without proper validation introduces a high risk of noncompliance. This approach prioritizes speed over security and regulatory adherence, which is professionally unacceptable and can lead to severe consequences. Implementing the VDI environment with a plan to address security and compliance later is another critical failure. This reactive approach creates a window of vulnerability where the system operates in a non-compliant state. It demonstrates a lack of foresight and a disregard for the ongoing nature of compliance and security management. Post-deployment remediation is often more costly and complex than proactive integration, and the interim period of noncompliance can still trigger regulatory penalties. Focusing solely on user experience and performance metrics without considering security and compliance is a narrow and ultimately detrimental approach. While user satisfaction is important, it cannot come at the expense of regulatory obligations. This oversight can lead to the deployment of an environment that is technically functional but legally and ethically unsound, exposing the organization to significant risks. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves 1. Identifying all relevant regulatory requirements and internal security policies. 2. Assessing the potential risks associated with each deployment option against these requirements. 3. Prioritizing solutions that demonstrably meet or exceed compliance standards. 4. Integrating security and compliance checks throughout the project lifecycle, from planning to deployment and ongoing management. 5. Documenting all decisions and justifications, particularly when deviations from standard practices are considered, though in this case, adherence is paramount. This systematic approach ensures that technical decisions are grounded in a comprehensive understanding of the operational, security, and regulatory landscape, leading to robust and compliant VDI solutions. Question 10. Investigation of a recurring performance degradation issue within a VMware Horizon 6 VDI environment, characterized by slow application loading times and intermittent desktop unresponsiveness, requires a systematic approach to process optimization. Which of the following diagnostic and optimization strategies best addresses this scenario? Option A. Focus exclusively on optimizing network latency between the VDI clients and the data center, as this is often the most significant factor in perceived performance. Option B. Conduct broad changes to Active Directory group policies and DNS settings, hypothesizing that these underlying infrastructure elements are impacting VDI responsiveness. Option C. Systematically analyze performance metrics from vSphere, storage, and network layers, correlating them with user-reported symptoms to identify specific bottlenecks before implementing targeted optimizations. Option D. Immediately increase the allocated CPU and RAM for all virtual desktops and the connection servers, assuming resource contention is the primary cause. The correct answer is C. Systematically analyze performance metrics from vSphere, storage, and network layers, correlating them with user-reported symptoms to identify specific bottlenecks before implementing targeted optimizations. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT environments where the performance of a virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI, is degrading, impacting user productivity. The challenge lies in identifying the root cause of the performance issues within a complex system like VMware Horizon, which involves multiple interconnected components, e.g., vSphere, network, storage, Active Directory, application layers. A hasty or incorrect diagnosis can lead to wasted resources, further performance degradation, and user dissatisfaction. Professionals must employ a systematic and data-driven approach to pinpoint the actual bottleneck. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a methodical investigation that starts with understanding the user-perceived symptoms and then progressively drills down into the technical layers of the VDI environment. This aligns with best practices for IT troubleshooting and process optimization. By first establishing a baseline of expected performance and then correlating observed issues with specific metrics across the vSphere infrastructure, storage, and network, a professional can systematically isolate the problem area. This data-driven method ensures that optimizations are targeted and effective, preventing the introduction of new issues or the misallocation of resources. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes efficient and effective resolution for the end users and the organization, minimizing disruption and maximizing resource utilization. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing broad, unverified changes without a clear understanding of the root cause is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. For instance, randomly increasing VM resources, CPU, RAM, without evidence of bottleneck in these areas is wasteful and can negatively impact other workloads, violating principles of efficient resource management. Similarly, focusing solely on network latency without considering other potential bottlenecks like storage I/O or application performance is an incomplete diagnostic process. This can lead to misspent effort and continued performance issues. Making changes to Active Directory configurations without a clear link to VDI performance is also problematic, as it introduces risk to core infrastructure services without a justified need. These approaches lack the rigor required for professional IT management and can lead to compliance issues related to resource allocation and service availability. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured troubleshooting methodology. This typically involves 1. Defining the problem clearly, user-reported symptoms. 2. Gathering information, performance metrics, logs, user feedback. 3. Identifying potential causes. 4. Testing hypotheses systematically. 5. Implementing solutions. 6. Verifying the fix. 7. Documenting the process and outcome. In VDI optimization, this means leveraging VMware's built-in tools, e.g., vRealize Operations, Horizon Performance Tracker, and other monitoring solutions to collect data across all relevant layers before making any changes. This ensures that decisions are informed, efficient, and justifiable. Question 11. What factors determine the appropriate level of data security and privacy controls to be implemented within a VMware Horizon virtual desktop environment, considering potential regulatory obligations? Option A. The perceived technical expertise of the IT support staff managing the virtual desktop infrastructure. Option B. The speed at which new virtual desktop images can be provisioned and deployed to end users. Option C. The classification of data to be accessed and processed by users within the virtual desktops and the specific regulatory frameworks governing that data. Option D. The total number of virtual desktops deployed and the available budget for security software. The correct answer is C. The classification of data to be accessed and processed by users within the virtual desktops and the specific regulatory frameworks governing that data. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT environments where the need for rapid deployment of virtual desktops conflicts with the imperative to maintain regulatory compliance, particularly concerning data privacy and security. The professional challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency with adherence to established legal and ethical frameworks governing the handling of sensitive user data within a virtual desktop infrastructure. The correct approach, which involves a thorough assessment of data classification and the implementation of appropriate security controls aligned with regulatory requirements before deployment, represents best professional practice. This proactive stance ensures that the virtual desktop environment is designed from the outset to meet legal obligations, such as those pertaining to data residency, access controls, and audit trails, thereby minimizing the risk of non-compliance and associated penalties. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible data stewardship and a robust understanding of the regulatory landscape. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of deployment over regulatory due diligence risks significant ethical and regulatory failures. For instance, deploying virtual desktops without understanding the sensitivity of the data they will host could lead to violations of data protection laws, such as unauthorized access or improper data handling. This failure to conduct a risk assessment and implement commensurate controls constitutes a breach of professional duty and can result in severe legal repercussions, reputational damage, and loss of trust. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on generic security measures without considering specific regulatory mandates, overlooks the nuanced requirements of compliance frameworks, potentially leaving critical vulnerabilities unaddressed and exposing the organization to legal scrutiny. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a structured risk-based approach. This begins with identifying all applicable regulatory frameworks. Subsequently, a comprehensive data classification exercise should be performed to understand the sensitivity and nature of the data to be processed. Based on this classification and regulatory requirements, appropriate technical and organizational security measures must be designed and implemented. Continuous monitoring and regular audits are essential to ensure ongoing compliance. This systematic process ensures that technology deployments are not only functional, but also legally sound and ethically responsible. Question 12. When evaluating a sudden and widespread report of slow performance across multiple VMware Horizon virtual desktops, which of the following actions represents the most professional and effective initial response? Option A. Analyze performance metrics and user activity logs to identify resource bottlenecks or specific application issues impacting the virtual desktops. Option B. Provision additional virtual desktops and increase the allocated resources for existing ones without further investigation. Option C. Disable antivirus scanning on all virtual desktops to reduce system overhead and improve responsiveness. Option D. Immediately revert all user profile settings to default configurations to eliminate potential user-specific performance impacts. The correct answer is A. Analyze performance metrics and user activity logs to identify resource bottlenecks or specific application issues impacting the virtual desktops. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in desktop virtualization environments, balancing user experience with resource utilization and security. The professional challenge lies in identifying the root cause of performance degradation without disrupting critical business operations or compromising data integrity. A hasty or uninformed decision can lead to widespread user dissatisfaction, increased support costs, and potential security vulnerabilities. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven investigation. This aligns with best professional practices by prioritizing evidence-based decision-making. Specifically, it adheres to the principles of efficient resource management and proactive problem-solving, which are implicit in maintaining a stable and performant virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI. By analyzing performance metrics and user activity, the administrator can pinpoint the specific cause of the slowdown, whether it's a resource bottleneck, an application issue, or a configuration problem. This methodical approach minimizes risk and ensures that any remediation steps are targeted and effective, ultimately leading to improved user productivity and system stability. An incorrect approach that immediately reverts all user settings without investigation fails to address the underlying issue. This is professionally unacceptable because it is a reactive, rather than proactive, solution that wastes valuable administrative time and resources. It also risks masking a more significant problem that could resurface later. Furthermore, it can lead to user frustration if their personalized settings are lost without a clear reason. Another incorrect approach, such as disabling a critical security feature to improve performance, represents a severe regulatory and ethical failure. While it might offer a temporary performance boost, it directly compromises the security posture of the VDI environment, potentially exposing sensitive data to unauthorized access or malware. This violates the fundamental duty of a VDI administrator to maintain a secure and compliant system. A third incorrect approach, focusing solely on increasing hardware resources without understanding the cause of the performance issue, is also professionally unsound. This is a costly and inefficient solution that does not guarantee improved performance and can lead to unnecessary expenditure. It demonstrates a lack of analytical rigor and a failure to apply problem-solving methodologies effectively. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve 1. Clearly defining the problem and its impact. 2. Gathering relevant data and metrics, performance counters, logs, user feedback. 3. Analyzing the data to identify potential root causes. 4. Formulating and testing hypotheses. 5. Implementing the most effective solution based on the analysis. 6. Monitoring the results and iterating if necessary. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, justifiable, and aligned with the goals of maintaining a secure, stable, and performant VDI environment. Question 13. The monitoring system demonstrates a critical alert indicating increased latency and high resource utilization across multiple VMware Horizon connection servers and virtual desktops. This has been accompanied by a surge in user-reported slowness and application unresponsiveness. What is the most appropriate initial step to assess the impact and identify the root cause? Option A. Correlate the performance metrics with recent changes made to the Horizon environment, the underlying vSphere infrastructure, network configurations, and any significant end-user activity patterns. Option B. Focus solely on gathering detailed feedback from end users experiencing the slowness to understand the specific applications and tasks that are most affected. Option C. Immediately initiate a hardware diagnostic and replacement procedure for the servers hosting the Horizon connection servers, assuming a hardware failure is the most probable cause. Option D. Proceed with restarting all VMware Horizon services and related infrastructure components in a staggered manner to see if performance improves. The correct answer is A. Correlate the performance metrics with recent changes made to the Horizon environment, the underlying vSphere infrastructure, network configurations, and any significant end-user activity patterns. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT environments where performance degradation can have a cascading effect on user productivity and business operations. The monitoring system's alert regarding increased latency and resource utilization in the VMware Horizon environment requires a systematic and informed response. The professional challenge lies in accurately diagnosing the root cause without disrupting ongoing operations and ensuring compliance with any relevant service level agreements, SLAs, or internal policies that dictate response times and escalation procedures. The urgency of the situation, indicated by the critical alert, necessitates a swift yet thorough impact assessment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted investigation that begins with correlating the observed symptoms with recent changes or events. This aligns with best practices for troubleshooting and impact assessment in virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI. By examining recent changes to the Horizon environment, underlying vSphere infrastructure, network configurations, and even end-user activity patterns, the administrator can identify potential triggers for the performance issues. This methodical approach ensures that the assessment is comprehensive, considering all contributing factors. Furthermore, understanding the scope of the impact which users, applications, or services are affected is crucial for prioritizing remediation efforts and communicating effectively with stakeholders. This aligns with the principle of minimizing business disruption, a key consideration in IT service management and regulatory compliance related to service availability. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately assume a hardware failure and initiate a hardware replacement without sufficient diagnostic evidence. This is a premature action that could lead to unnecessary downtime, cost, and potentially mask the true underlying software or configuration issue. It fails to adhere to a structured troubleshooting methodology and could violate change management procedures if not properly documented and approved. Another incorrect approach is to solely focus on end-user complaints without investigating the underlying infrastructure. While user feedback is valuable, it is often a symptom rather than the root cause. Ignoring the infrastructure's health and performance metrics, as indicated by the monitoring system, is a failure to conduct a comprehensive impact assessment and could lead to misdiagnosis and ineffective remediation. This could also have regulatory implications if it leads to prolonged service degradation that violates an SLA. A third incorrect approach is to restart services randomly without a clear understanding of their function or potential dependencies. This is a brute force method that can cause further instability, data corruption, or unintended outages. It demonstrates a lack of analytical rigor and a failure to follow established incident response protocols, which often require documented troubleshooting steps and risk assessments before implementing disruptive actions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first acknowledging the alert and its severity. The next step is to initiate a structured impact assessment, which involves gathering data from monitoring tools, logs, and user reports. This data should then be analyzed to identify patterns and potential root causes. The assessment should consider the scope of the impact, the criticality of affected services, and any dependencies. Based on this assessment, a remediation plan should be developed, prioritizing actions that will resolve the issue with the least disruption. Communication with stakeholders, including affected users and management, is paramount throughout the process. This systematic and data-driven approach ensures that decisions are informed, risks are managed, and the most effective solutions are implemented, thereby upholding professional standards and minimizing business impact. Question 14. Process analysis reveals that a VMware Horizon deployment has been implemented to provide remote access to corporate applications and data. However, the current access control configuration grants all users full administrative privileges to their assigned virtual desktops, with no specific restrictions on application usage or data access beyond the default operating system settings. This approach was chosen to expedite deployment and minimize initial user support requests. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices for securing a virtual desktop environment and ensuring data integrity? Option A. Implement granular access controls based on the principle of least privilege, ensuring users only have access to the specific applications and data necessary for their job functions. Option B. Deploy the virtual desktops without any specific access control configurations, relying solely on network-level security measures. Option C. Apply a universal security policy that blocks all non-essential applications and data access for all users, regardless of their role. Option D. Grant all users unrestricted administrative access to their virtual desktops to maximize flexibility and minimize user-related support issues. The correct answer is A. Implement granular access controls based on the principle of least privilege, ensuring users only have access to the specific applications and data necessary for their job functions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT environments where the rapid adoption of new technologies, such as VMware Horizon, can outpace the development and implementation of robust security policies and procedures. The professional challenge lies in balancing the business need for agile and accessible virtual desktops with the imperative to protect sensitive corporate data and comply with relevant regulations. The pressure to deploy quickly, can lead to overlooking critical security configurations, creating vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Careful judgment is required to ensure that security is not an afterthought, but an integral part of the deployment process. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and policy-driven security posture. Implementing granular access controls based on the principle of least privilege is a cornerstone of best professional practice in cybersecurity. This aligns with the general principles of data protection and IT governance expected in a professional setting. By ensuring that users only have access to the specific resources and applications necessary for their roles, the attack surface is significantly reduced. This approach minimizes the potential impact of a compromised user account, as the damage would be confined to the limited resources that user could access. This aligns with the spirit of responsible IT management and the need to safeguard organizational assets. Incorrect approaches analysis. Allowing unrestricted access to all virtual desktops for all users represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach violates the principle of least privilege, creating an open invitation for unauthorized access and data exfiltration. It demonstrates a disregard for data security best practices and a failure to implement adequate controls, which could lead to breaches of confidentiality and integrity. Implementing a blanket security policy that restricts access to all virtual desktops for all users, regardless of their role or business need, is also professionally unacceptable. While seemingly secure, this approach hinders productivity and operational efficiency, failing to meet the business requirements for which the virtual desktop infrastructure was deployed. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of user needs and an overly restrictive, rather than a risk-based, security strategy. This can lead to workarounds that bypass security controls, ultimately creating new vulnerabilities. Failing to document and regularly review access control policies for virtual desktops is a critical oversight. This lack of documentation makes it difficult to audit access, identify discrepancies, and ensure ongoing compliance. It also means that, as roles and responsibilities change, access rights may not be updated accordingly, leading to privilege creep and increased security risks over time. This demonstrates a failure in IT governance and a lack of due diligence in maintaining a secure environment. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to security. This involves identifying critical assets, understanding potential threats and vulnerabilities, and implementing controls that are proportionate to the identified risks. The decision-making process should involve a thorough understanding of business requirements, user roles, and regulatory obligations. Regular security assessments, policy reviews, and continuous monitoring are essential to adapt to evolving threats and maintain a secure and compliant virtual desktop environment. The principle of least privilege should always be the guiding factor in granting access. Question 15. Stakeholder feedback indicates an urgent need to deploy a new virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI, solution to support a rapidly expanding remote workforce. The primary business driver is immediate productivity gains. Given this pressure, which of the following approaches best balances the urgency of deployment with the critical need for security and compliance? Option A. Engage the IT security and compliance teams early in the planning phase to define security requirements and compliance controls, integrating these into the VDI design and deployment plan from the outset. Option B. Immediately initiate the VDI deployment, making security and compliance configuration decisions based on standard organizational templates and past project experiences without specific validation for this new deployment. Option C. Prioritize the rapid deployment of the VDI solution with a focus on core functionality, deferring detailed security hardening and compliance checks to a post-implementation review. Option D. Proceed with the VDI deployment using the fastest available deployment method, assuming that the underlying infrastructure already meets all necessary security and compliance standards. The correct answer is C. Prioritize the rapid deployment of the VDI solution with a focus on core functionality, deferring detailed security hardening and compliance checks to a post-implementation review. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between immediate business needs and the long-term implications of technical decisions, particularly concerning data security and compliance. The need to rapidly deploy a new virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI solution, driven by stakeholder urgency, risks overlooking critical security configurations, and adherence to established regulatory frameworks. Careful judgment is required to balance speed with due diligence. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, risk-aware decision-making process aligned with the VMware Certified Professional 6 Desktop and Mobility 2V0-651. Exams focus on effective VDI deployment and management. This involves a thorough assessment of security requirements, compliance mandates, and potential impacts before implementation. By engaging relevant security and compliance teams, the professional ensures that the VDI solution is not only functional but also secure and legally sound, thereby mitigating future risks and potential breaches. This aligns with the general principles of responsible IT deployment, which emphasize proactive risk management and adherence to organizational policies and external regulations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on rapid deployment without adequate security and compliance review is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical lapse. Specifically, it violates the implicit or explicit requirement to protect sensitive data, which is a cornerstone of data privacy regulations. Though specific regulations are not detailed here, the principle is universal in professional IT. Such an approach could lead to data breaches, non-compliance penalties, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, which involves making assumptions about security configurations based on previous deployments without verifying current requirements, is also flawed. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to adapt to evolving security landscapes and specific project needs, potentially leaving the environment vulnerable. A third incorrect approach, which defers security and compliance considerations to a later stage, is equally problematic. This reactive stance increases the likelihood of costly rework, security gaps, and potential noncompliance, as fundamental architectural decisions may need to be revisited. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that includes 1. Clearly defining project objectives and constraints, including stakeholder expectations and timelines. 2. Identifying all relevant stakeholders, including IT security, compliance, legal, and business units. 3. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment, considering technical, security, and compliance risks. 4. Evaluating potential solutions against these risks and requirements. 5. Developing a phased implementation plan that incorporates security and compliance checks at each stage. And 6. Establishing clear communication channels to ensure all stakeholders are informed and aligned throughout the process. Question 16. Process analysis reveals that users are reporting significant performance degradation with a critical business application accessed via VMware Horizon. Initial user feedback suggests the application is slow to respond and occasionally freezes. The IT team needs to address this issue promptly to minimize business impact. Which of the following approaches represents the most professional and compliant method for diagnosing and resolving this problem? Option A. Focus exclusively on investigating network latency between the user's endpoint and the Horizon connection servers, as this is a common cause of VDI performance problems. Option B. Immediately deploy a system-wide patch for the operating system on all virtual desktops, as recent updates have been known to cause performance issues in similar environments. Option C. Roll back the entire VMware Horizon environment to a snapshot taken last week, assuming the issue is related to recent configuration changes. Option D. Initiate a comprehensive review of VMware Horizon infrastructure logs, performance metrics, CPU, memory, storage I/O, network latency, for both the connection servers and the virtual desktops, and application-specific logs. Correlate this data to identify patterns and potential bottlenecks before proposing and testing specific remediation steps. Correct answer is D. Initiate a comprehensive review of VMware Horizon infrastructure logs, performance metrics, CPU, memory, storage I/O, network latency, for both the connection servers and the virtual desktops, and application-specific logs. Correlate this data to identify patterns and potential bottlenecks before proposing and testing specific remediation steps. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT environments where a critical business application's performance is degrading, impacting user productivity and potentially revenue. The challenge lies in diagnosing the root cause within a complex virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI, managed by VMware Horizon, while adhering to established change management procedures and ensuring minimal disruption to end users. The pressure to resolve the issue quickly must be balanced against the need for a systematic and documented approach to avoid introducing further problems or violating compliance requirements. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, phased troubleshooting methodology that prioritizes data collection and analysis before implementing changes. This aligns with best practices for IT service management and regulatory compliance, which often mandate documented procedures for changes and incident resolution. Specifically, this approach emphasizes understanding the current state, identifying potential causes through monitoring and log analysis, and then proposing targeted, tested solutions. This methodical process minimizes the risk of unintended consequences, ensures that any implemented changes are justified by evidence, and provides a clear audit trail for compliance purposes. In a regulated environment, demonstrating due diligence and a systematic problem-solving process is paramount. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a broad, untested patch across all user desktops without prior analysis is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach bypasses essential change management controls, which are often mandated by regulations to ensure system stability and security. It introduces a high risk of widespread disruption if the patch is ineffective or introduces new issues, potentially leading to service outages that could violate service-level agreements, SLAs, or even regulatory requirements for business continuity. Rolling back the entire VDI environment to a previous snapshot without understanding the specific cause of the performance degradation is also professionally unacceptable. While it might temporarily resolve the issue, it fails to address the underlying problem, which is likely to recur. This approach demonstrates a lack of diagnostic skill and an unwillingness to perform root cause analysis, which is a fundamental expectation in IT operations. Furthermore, such a drastic rollback without proper justification and documentation could violate change control policies and audit requirements. Focusing solely on network latency as the sole cause without investigating other potential VDI components is an incomplete diagnostic approach. While network issues can impact VDI performance, other factors such as storage I/O, CPU contention, memory pressure, or application-specific issues within the virtual desktops themselves could be the primary culprits. This narrow focus risks overlooking the true root cause, leading to prolonged downtime and repeated troubleshooting efforts, which can have financial and reputational consequences. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should employ a systematic decision-making framework. This typically involves 1. Incident identification and prioritization. Clearly define the problem and its impact. 2. Information gathering. Collect all relevant data from monitoring tools, logs, and user feedback. 3. Root cause analysis. Systematically analyze the gathered information to pinpoint the underlying cause. 4. Solution development. Propose targeted solutions based on the identified root cause. 5. Testing and validation. Test proposed solutions in a controlled environment before production deployment. 6. Implementation. Deploy the validated solution following established change management procedures. 7. Verification and monitoring. Confirm the issue is resolved and monitor for recurrence. This framework ensures that actions are data-driven, risk-mitigated, and compliant with organizational policies and relevant regulations. Question 17. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive evaluation of deployment methodologies for new virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI, to ensure both operational efficiency and adherence to established security and compliance mandates. When faced with a tight deadline for a critical business unit's VDI rollout, which of the following approaches best balances these competing demands while upholding professional responsibility? Option A. Initiate a phased deployment, beginning with a pilot group, and concurrently engage the security and compliance teams to review the proposed VDI architecture, configuration, and data handling procedures against all relevant internal policies and external regulations before full rollout. Option B. Expedite the deployment by adopting the most technically advanced VDI solution available, relying on the vendor's default security settings and assuming they meet all organizational compliance requirements without independent verification. Option C. Prioritize immediate deployment by leveraging pre-approved templates and deferring detailed security and compliance reviews until after the system is operational, with a plan to remediate any identified issues later. Option D. Focus exclusively on achieving the highest possible end-user performance metrics during the initial deployment, assuming that security and compliance can be retrofitted or addressed as a secondary concern once the system is stable and widely adopted. The correct answer is C. Prioritize immediate deployment by leveraging pre-approved templates and deferring detailed security and compliance reviews until after the system is operational, with a plan to remediate any identified issues later. Explanation: the scenario presents a common challenge in IT infrastructure management, balancing the need for rapid deployment of new virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI, with the imperative to adhere to established security and compliance policies. The professional challenge lies in the potential for expediency to override due diligence, leading to security vulnerabilities or non-compliance. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the deployment process is both efficient and secure, meeting business objectives without compromising regulatory standing. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, policy-driven deployment. This aligns with the principles of responsible IT governance, which mandate that all technology implementations must be assessed against existing security frameworks and regulatory requirements. By involving the security and compliance teams early, the organization ensures that the VDI solution is designed and implemented in a manner that meets or exceeds the necessary standards, thereby mitigating risks and avoiding potential penalties. This proactive engagement is a cornerstone of robust IT security and compliance. An incorrect approach that bypasses established change control and security review processes is professionally unacceptable. This failure directly contravenes the spirit and letter of most IT governance frameworks, which emphasize accountability and risk management. Specifically, it represents a significant ethical failure by disregarding the established protocols designed to protect sensitive data and maintain system integrity. Such an approach creates a direct pathway to security breaches and regulatory noncompliance, potentially exposing the organization to significant financial and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical performance metrics without considering security implications is also professionally unsound. While performance is important, it cannot be the sole determinant of a successful VDI deployment. This approach demonstrates a lack of holistic risk assessment, failing to acknowledge that a high-performing system that is insecure or non-compliant is ultimately a liability. This oversight can lead to the deployment of a solution that, while technically proficient, fails to meet critical business and regulatory obligations, thereby creating a different but equally significant risk. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a multi-stakeholder approach. First, clearly define the business requirements and technical objectives for the VDI deployment. Second, consult and adhere to all relevant internal security policies and external regulatory mandates. Third, engage all relevant teams, including security, compliance, and operations, from the initial planning stages through to deployment and ongoing management. Fourth, conduct thorough risk assessments and implement appropriate mitigation strategies. Finally, establish clear metrics for success that encompass not only performance, but also security and compliance. This structured, collaborative, and risk-aware methodology ensures that technology deployments are strategically aligned with organizational goals and responsibilities. Question 18. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of performance degradation impacting user productivity during peak hours, alongside a moderate consequence if this degradation occurs. Considering this, which of the following approaches to process optimization within a VMware Horizon environment is most aligned with best professional practice for mitigating this identified risk? Option A. Aggressively consolidate virtual machine resources and reduce desktop pools to maximize server density, assuming that users will adapt to minor performance fluctuations. Option B. Implement proactive performance monitoring and analysis of key metrics such as logon times, application responsiveness, and resource utilization, using the gathered data to identify and address specific bottlenecks before they significantly impact users. Option C. Postpone any significant process optimization efforts until the next major version upgrade of the VMware Horizon platform is scheduled. Option D. Rely solely on user-reported issues to identify and address performance problems, prioritizing fixes based on the volume of complaints received. Correct answer is B. Implement proactive performance monitoring and analysis of key metrics such as logon times, application responsiveness, and resource utilization, using the gathered data to identify and address specific bottlenecks before they significantly impact users. Explanation. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing operational efficiency with the integrity of user data and system stability, a common concern in desktop virtualization environments. The core difficulty lies in identifying and implementing process optimizations that yield tangible benefits without introducing new risks or violating established best practices for VMware Horizon deployments. The correct approach, focusing on proactive monitoring and performance tuning based on observed trends, represents best professional practice because it aligns with the principles of continuous improvement and risk mitigation. By analyzing performance metrics and user experience data, administrators can identify bottlenecks and inefficiencies before they significantly impact users or lead to system instability. This data-driven approach is crucial for maintaining a stable and performant virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI, directly supporting the availability and reliability requirements often stipulated in IT service-level agreements, SLAs, and internal governance policies. It demonstrates a commitment to understanding the system's behavior and making informed decisions that enhance user productivity and reduce operational overhead. An incorrect approach that prioritizes aggressive resource consolidation without adequate testing or monitoring fails to uphold professional standards. This could lead to degraded user experience, application instability, and potential data corruption, violating the implicit ethical obligation to provide a functional and reliable service. Such an approach might also contravene internal IT policies or even regulatory requirements related to data integrity and business continuity, as system downtime or performance issues can have significant financial and reputational consequences. Another incorrect approach, such as implementing changes based solely on anecdotal user feedback without objective data, is also professionally unsound. While user feedback is valuable, it can be subjective and may not always pinpoint the root cause of performance issues. Relying solely on such feedback without empirical validation can lead to misdirected efforts, wasted resources, and potentially introduce new problems. This lack of a systematic, data-backed approach undermines the credibility of IT operations and can lead to a perception of incompetence. A further incorrect approach, such as deferring all optimization efforts until a major system upgrade, neglects the ongoing need for process improvement. VDI environments are dynamic, with evolving user needs, application updates, and underlying infrastructure changes. A wait-and-see attitude towards optimization can result in a gradual decline in performance and user satisfaction, making future remediation more complex and costly. This passive stance fails to embrace the proactive and iterative nature of effective IT management. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that involves continuous monitoring, data analysis, risk assessment, and phased implementation of optimizations. This framework should prioritize user experience, system stability, and adherence to established best practices and organizational policies. When considering process optimization, the steps should include defining clear objectives, gathering baseline performance data, identifying potential areas for improvement, evaluating the risks and benefits of proposed changes, implementing changes in a controlled manner, e.g., pilot groups, monitoring the impact of changes and iterating based on the results. Question 19. The performance metrics show a consistent pattern of increased VDI session logon times and application unresponsiveness across multiple user groups. As the VDI administrator, you suspect a potential resource contention issue or a configuration drift. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible first step to investigate this problem? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive review of the VDI infrastructure's resource utilization, CPU, memory, storage IOPS, network bandwidth, at the hypervisor and storage array levels, correlating this with the reported performance degradation. Option B. Advise users to reboot their virtual desktops multiple times a day to see if that resolves the performance issues. Option C. Immediately begin reviewing the contents of individual user profile folders and application data for any anomalies that might be causing the slowdown. Option D. Temporarily disable all non-essential user applications and services within the VDI environment to isolate the impact. The correct answer is C. Immediately begin reviewing the contents of individual user profile folders and application data for any anomalies that might be causing the slowdown. Explanation: the performance metrics show a significant increase in user-reported latency and application responsiveness issues within the virtual desktop environment. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it directly impacts end-user productivity and satisfaction, potentially leading to business disruption. The IT administrator must balance the need for rapid problem resolution with adherence to established protocols and ethical considerations regarding data privacy and system integrity. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven investigation that prioritizes user impact while respecting privacy boundaries. This aligns with professional best practices by ensuring that troubleshooting steps are documented, justifiable, and do not unnecessarily infringe on user data. It also adheres to the principle of least privilege, where access to sensitive information is only granted when absolutely necessary for diagnosis and resolution. An incorrect approach would be to immediately access and review individual user data without a clear justification or prior authorization. This could violate privacy regulations and ethical guidelines by exposing personal or confidential information. Another incorrect approach would be to implement broad, untested system-wide changes without proper impact analysis, potentially exacerbating the problem or causing new issues, which is unprofessional and risks system instability. Finally, ignoring the reported issues or delaying investigation indefinitely is a failure to uphold professional responsibility and service level agreements. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that includes clearly defining the problem, gathering objective data, consulting relevant documentation and policies, identifying potential solutions, assessing the risks and ethical implications of each solution, and implementing the chosen solution with proper monitoring and communication. In this case, the focus should be on network, storage, and compute resource utilization within the VDI environment before delving into individual user sessions or data. Question 20. Stakeholder feedback indicates that some users are experiencing intermittent slowness and application unresponsiveness within their VMware Horizon virtual desktops. The feedback is general and does not pinpoint specific applications or times of day. As a VMware VDI administrator, what is the most appropriate initial course of action to address these concerns? Option A. Immediately increase the allocated RAM and CPU resources for all virtual desktops in the affected pools. Option B. Conduct a thorough performance analysis of the Horizon environment, examining key metrics such as VM resource utilization, network latency, storage I/O, and Horizon connection server health. Option C. Roll out a new, unproven optimization script across all virtual desktop images to improve performance. Option D. Advise users to close unnecessary applications and restart their virtual desktops regularly. The correct answer is A. Immediately increase the allocated RAM and CPU resources for all virtual desktops in the affected pools. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI, environments, balancing user experience with resource utilization and security. Professional challenge lies in interpreting vague stakeholder feedback and translating it into actionable technical solutions that adhere to best practices and potential regulatory considerations within the scope of VMware VDI deployments. Careful judgment is required to avoid over-engineering or under-provisioning, both of which can lead to dissatisfaction and operational inefficiencies. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven investigation. This aligns with professional best practices by prioritizing objective analysis over assumptions. It demonstrates a commitment to understanding the root cause of performance issues before implementing solutions. This methodical approach is crucial for ensuring that any changes made are effective, sustainable, and do not introduce new problems. From a regulatory perspective, while the 2V0-651 exam syllabus doesn't specify a particular jurisdiction's financial regulations, a responsible IT professional would always consider data integrity and availability, which are foundational to many compliance frameworks. A documented, evidence-based troubleshooting process also supports auditability. An incorrect approach that immediately jumps to increasing resources without investigation fails to address the underlying issue. This could be a performance bottleneck elsewhere in the infrastructure, inefficient application behavior, or suboptimal VDI configuration. Such an approach is professionally unsound because it is wasteful of resources and may not solve the problem, leading to continued stakeholder dissatisfaction. Ethically, it represents a failure to exercise due diligence and a potential misuse of organizational resources. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on user-reported symptoms without technical validation, is also professionally deficient. While user feedback is important, it can be subjective and incomplete. Relying solely on anecdotal evidence can lead to misdiagnosis and ineffective solutions. This approach lacks the rigor expected of a VDI professional and can result in a cycle of reactive, rather than proactive, problem solving. It also risks overlooking critical technical factors that are not immediately apparent to the end user. A third incorrect approach, which involves implementing broad, untested changes across the entire environment, is highly risky. This can have unintended consequences, potentially impacting a larger user base and introducing instability. It demonstrates a lack of controlled testing and validation, which is a cornerstone of professional IT operations. This approach can lead to significant downtime and further erode stakeholder confidence. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Acknowledging and documenting stakeholder feedback. 2. Gathering objective performance data from the VDI environment, e.g., using VMware Horizon's built-in monitoring tools, vCenter performance metrics. 3. Analyzing this data to identify specific bottlenecks or anomalies. 4. Formulating hypotheses based on the data. 5. Developing targeted solutions to test. 6. Implementing solutions in a controlled manner, e.g., pilot groups. 7. Monitoring the impact of changes and iterating as necessary. This structured approach ensures that solutions are effective, efficient, and justifiable.